So can we still continue to use this golden rule of drainage? And unfortunately, my conclusion is that we can no longer use this golden rule of drainage. We have to modify it. We do want to drain only what is necessary for good trafficability and crop growth, but there would be situations where you would want to drain more, such as in spring, future spring weather, but you may need to store and recycle that water for the summertime. So it's going to become more of a necessity, even if we're not feeling it right now. And the first step towards building that resiliency is let's just do the minimum and see if we can survive. So the one good practice that comes to my mind is the drainage water management or controlled drainage. For those who don't know what that means, is if you have a free draining outlet, you essentially put a control structure at that outlet and stack up boards in that control structure so that you can raise the water table instead of letting the outlet freely flow. Now, the controlled drainage has been studied here in Ohio for last 20 plus years. Dr. Norm Fauci, Larry Brown, and Dr. Barry Allred, they have done outstanding research on this practice. And we know that this practice works in flat landscapes for reducing discharge. It has really outstanding water quality benefits, reduces up to 40% nitrate reduction. And it does have some benefit to crop yield, especially in dry years. We have seen about 6% yield benefit to corn, about 3.5% to soybeans within that zone of influence. ODA has conducted similar surveys and found out that over 50% of the producers actually experience an increase in corn and soybean when they're using controlled drainage during growing season. Now, we know that controlled drainage is a win-win practice, mainly because it has the potential for crop yield increase as well as the benefit to the water quality. However, it does not give you the surety that it will supplement all the water that is needed. My estimate tells me that there is about an inch of water that you can gain in a soil profile by practicing controlled drainage during the growing season. It's a passive practice. You're going to retain more water in the field, but that doesn't mean you're going to retain water throughout the growing season. That water is going to probably get used by mid-July or end of July. And after that, you're going to still end up with a situation where the crops are still suffering from a deficit. And that's where I think supplementing additional water is where drainage water recycling or recycling of drainage water comes in. And it's, as the name itself describes, it's a simple practice where essentially instead of letting your drainage water discharge into a ditch, you're creating a storage structure of some kind, a reservoir, and using that water to then irrigate the cropland, whether it's that same field or some other field downstream. But essentially storing, capturing, and then using that water for irrigation is the concept. And we have seen some really good benefits with respect to the water quality, because you're essentially reducing the discharge from that field going into the downstream water bodies. And it also seems like we can apply it to landscapes that are not flat. So with controlled drainage, as I said, the first criteria was it had to be a relatively flat field. You could potentially look at rolling topography where you could still be capturing the water and then pumping that back uphill for irrigation. When it comes to capturing the water, I think I covered that with a reservoir. And then when you're irrigating, you have multiple options to go for irrigation. could be an overhead irrigation system or a subsurface irrigation system or a sub-irrigation system. This also has recently been added to a NRCS practice standard 447, which is now called irrigation and drainage tailwater recovery. It used to be irrigation tailwater recovery. Now it is irrigation and drainage tailwater recovery. So there is opportunity for some EQIP dollars to flow through for this practice. Unfortunately, right now here in Ohio, it's not on our EQIP list. So even if you wanted to, you won't be able to get NRCS funding for establishing a drainage water recycling system. There's multiple benefits, as I mentioned. Irrigation is definitely going to help you increase the crop yields, water quality benefit. There is some potential to actually have an impact on downstream flooding, especially if you're putting a reservoir at a larger watershed scale. And then there is possible options where you could be integrating this with your manure application, using it for dilution and so on. There are co-benefits as well. There is co-benefits with respect to the wildlife habitat and recreation as well. Here is a regional synthesis that was done on drainage water recycling. We had drainage water recycling. We had an increase in, I apologize, I'm working from home and here's some background. So there is definitely some increase in crop yield response with drainage water recycling. One step further beyond that, we do have the option of pairing it up with more ecological practice like the wetlands. And interestingly, this research was done in 1990s. So we have already proven here in Ohio how a drainage water recycling system can exist with. Can you please? A drainage water recycling system can exist with a wetland system. All right. So coming back to the wetland reservoir sub-irrigation systems, essentially what we're talking about is the water from your field is, instead of going directly into the reservoir, you're routing that through a wetland cell so that the water gets some level of treatment, especially for the sediment part of it, because when it comes to irrigation systems, they are very sensitive to having sediment in the water. So the wetlands definitely provide that added benefit there. And there was 10 or 15 years of research done. Here is an example from Defiance County, where they had a field that was sending water through a wetland into a reservoir, and that was being pumped back into those fields. There's a nice fact sheet on the Transforming Drainage website that shows you the benefit of a versus system. And instead of calling a win-win, it's actually a win-win-win system where you're a practice where you're getting the crop yield benefit, the nitrate, or the water quality benefit, as well as a habitat benefit. So I'm gonna quickly talk about the capture and storage component of this system. And if you were to apply 5 inches on 40 acres, an acre inch is roughly about 2,500 gallons. It's slightly more than that. For simplicity, I'm using 2,500 gallons. So 1 inch of water over 40 acres is about 1 million gallons, and 5 inches of water over 40 acres would be about 5 million gallons. So that's how much water you would need if you were to apply 5 inches over one season, right? So that's the kind of capacity that you would want to build in your irrigation pond if you were to irrigate 40 acres. So here is a site that we're developing right now at OSU Lima campus. and we're collecting surface water and drainage water from about 40 acres of these two fields that's coming into the pond, and then we're going to demonstrate overhead irrigation on one side and then sub irrigation on the other side. So that's kind of the intention for this site. Then let's see. Another aerial view after the site. This is also during the construction of the site, while the pond was being built. As you can see, it's a pretty significant footprint. This is about a 2.6 acre water area that is gonna happen, about maybe close to 3 acres of area that went out of production. In this case, during construction, there is the design process and the construction process is very involved and requires you to have a engineer, a professional engineer, and a pretty big team to kind of manage that project. One hiccup we had was we suspected that there were some sand veins at the bottom of the pond after it was dug. Luckily, it ended up being a controllable situation, but those kinds of situations can create a bit of a limitation here, or at least a need to take additional measures. One unique thing we have done is we have fitted our pond with a automated control system, or a smart drainage system, which would allow us to remotely operate the outlet of that pond so that we can control the water level in the pond, even from our office here. And this is how it looks like probably 2 weeks ago, about half full as of now. When it comes to drainage water recycling, these are some of the questions as a farmer you should be asking. Number one is, can I afford it? The project itself costs a huge amount of money upfront. Yeah, but when you look at the cost economics, you do have a return on investment that you can calculate based on that benefit that you see. How much land will be taken out of production? What is the opportunity cost there? What are the trade-offs between for the cost and the payback periods? And then who will pay for it? Can I get any cost share or assistance on this? And the answer is depends as of now, mainly because the practice standard 447 is not yet approved. I shouldn't say approved, but adopted here in Ohio. When you're kind of investing into a completely new system, especially irrigation, is not every farmer is used to. There is a bit of a learning curve, and the maintenance and the troubleshooting needs, all of that probably comes up as part of this. In terms of planning process, just to give you some idea on how large a pond we're talking about, as I said, for 40 acres, the calculation for us was about 2.5 acres, 8 feet of depth and 2.5 acres of pond area to irrigate 40 acres. So if you look at that ratio between the pond area to irrigated area, essentially what you're looking at is about 1 acre of pond area per 15 acres of irrigated area, or somewhere between 1 to 15 and 1 to 13 or 1 to 10. So it's a significant amount of storage area that you need. So what you probably need to be thinking about is, how can I shrink this? Do I really need to store all 5 inches ahead of time? Or do I build a pond only for 3 inches, but have the ability to supplement that? Because if you're reducing the amount of storage needed, that means you're reducing the footprint of that pond. And here is an example. Here's some alternatives you could use a deeper or multiple ponds, refill the pond using groundwater or nearby stream or ditch. if allowed by the law, I have to add that caution there, or any other sources of water that you can find. If you're using a more efficient irrigation system, then maybe you don't require too much water to apply. And then maybe don't just aim for all 5 inches, just aim to do more of a supplemental irrigation only during critical periods. So here is a just kind of a visual scenario where this is the actual size of the reservoir that's required. And here is different scenarios that you could come up with that could make it shrink the size of the reservoir, or put the reservoir in a spot where you could be looking at a kind of a corner spot where it's not a production area. When it comes to irrigation, as I mentioned, you have the option of overhead irrigation and sub-irrigation. Center pivot systems are very well known. This is a newer system, 360 rain system that has recently come on the market and seems to have a lot more potential because of the portable nature. So it's not bound to one field. You could transport it from one field to another, and it spools the supply line on its own, and so on. So it's a pretty cool system, has a lot of potential. Overhead irrigation has been tested here in Ohio. A lot of anecdotal evidence. Farmers in Southern Ohio are already using it, and they're seeing about 65 to 100 bushel yield benefit. And for corn, the return on investment is really good on this system, especially in Southern Ohio. So irrigation itself as a practice has been very well proven. And for irrigation systems, there is some NRCS funding mechanisms that are available. The criteria is, however, you have to be irrigating already to then sign up for some of the other management type of funding mechanisms. The other option is sub-irrigation, where essentially you're using the drainage system for irrigation. And what you're doing is you're pumping the water out of the pond into your drainage system. And then that's going back. So you're collecting the water from the drainage system into the pond. And then here is the loop going back. You're pumping that out. You're not necessarily putting it through the same outlet pipe, but it would be ideal to pump it into the most upstream portion of the field first and irrigate those portions, and then come downhill as you are irrigating those different sections. And you can make this happen with the help of these control structures that I had mentioned for control drainage. Essentially what that does is it is pushing that water back into the system along the laterals. So if these are the two laterals that you see, the water that has been pumped back into the system is going to be pushed out of those laterals, and it's going to push the water table up. The key is to bring the water table in the root zone uniformly above those tile lines, and especially within the root zone. So you need to be pumping water continuously until you have maintained the water table in between the two lateral lines, not just above the laterals. Again, sub-irrigation research has been done over the last 25 years here in Ohio, and it has been proven that for corn, we're looking at about an average yield increase of up to 20%, and in dry years, it goes up to 30%. For soybeans, we're looking at 10% yield increase, 12% yield increase, and in dry years, it looks more like 25%. So these, again, there are really good references here in terms of these fact sheets. I'd be happy to provide those links at the end of the presentation here. But here is why I'm talking about drainage water recycling as a practice rather than irrigation as a practice. If you look at the map of Ohio, we don't have good surface water sources here in Ohio, in Northwest Ohio. We don't have good subsurface water resources. This is the groundwater map of Ohio. And any colors that you see, blue or darker, whatever this color is, are the ones that could potentially support a center pivot system or irrigation system. Anything this color, or this color is essentially a well discharge that is not going to be able to support an irrigation system. So in July and August, when you're actually needing the water for your crops, there is absolutely no source that you can tap into for irrigation. And that is the primary reason why we need to think about storing the drainage water that you are otherwise letting go during the non-growing season. So if you look at your after harvest, the drain flow picks up. This is drainage outflow on monthly basis. By the time you're ready for planting, you have already let go about 8 to 12 inches of water out of your tile systems. That water, we don't need all of it. We need about half of it that you can store. During growing season, you're looking at anywhere between 2 to 4 inches, but there is a very high variability and uncertainty in the growing season. So the best way would be to bank on that water that you're otherwise letting go during the non-growing season, store that, and then use that during the growing season. Let's see. This is probably my last or second to last slide. Where do I start? I would start looking at the maps for my entire farm, and especially if you have drainage maps for individual fields. See if there are locations, and Mark would probably relate to this and probably argue with me that, hey, you're talking about finding good spots for wetlands, and I totally agree with you. I think there is space for wetlands and these irrigation ponds to coexist. If it's, of course, there is an additional criteria for wetland design. However, if a location was suitable for storing large amount of water, that is the main criteria that you want to use. Of course, there are additional things that you want to look at. The best resource on drainage water recycling, I would suggest, is not my website, but the Transforming Drainage website. And if you go to that website, you will find outstanding resources on drainage water recycling. The technical help can come from your local soil water district, OSU Extension Office, or NRCS staff. I'm always happy to help people. I get a lot of calls about just who are just thinking about the system and want to get started on that route. If you go to this transformingdrainage.org website, you'll find this fact sheet and you'll find it very useful. It's a questions and answers type of a format, and they have some case studies, and there is a case study from Ohio there. So very useful information on that website overall. If it comes up, I'll be happy to share my screen again and show you the website and some of the tools and videos that they have. I'll stop there. And